Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Michaela Peters. So today I want to make another controversial video about America because I wrote this in the caption, but I don't think I said it in the last video, entitled America is a Scam, which I thought was hilarious that had as much reach as it did. What's his name? The really famous YouTuber guy. Why am I drawing a blank? Mr. Beast. Yeah. I have looked up one of his videos, which was like, how to like be a better YouTuber. I mean, obviously he's the best YouTuber, so like it would make sense to like consult him in a video presence. And he said that basically the more controversial of an opinion that you put out there, the more it's going to interest somebody in like wanting to listen to your video, or watch your video, whatever. So I was like, okay. So sometimes I do that stuff on purpose, like TBH as clickbait. So this one is going to be about how the American dream is dead. And I really thought about making this video for like 4 days already, because we talked about this. Actually, I was with one of my friends this weekend and we're like, yeah, the American dream as it existed for our parents. She didn't say it was dead, but she's like, it just doesn't exist anymore. And I'm like, it's dead. So that's what this is going to be about. And I felt even more inspired to make this video right after. All right, I'm going to explain how this happened. Through some stroke of luck, I ended up where I live now. And the backstory behind that apparently is somebody who was in here was the brother of somebody who was like managing everything, but I think the guy maybe had some sort of drug issue or something like that. So he kind of got kicked out, which now we get into a very complicated issue, which is to what extent should you enable drug use? Ooh, now that's really a hot topic. In case anybody didn't know this, and this is a little bit of an irrelevant side note, Finland is one of the only countries that has drug use centers, so like where they monitor you actually using drugs. And it kind of gets to like, yeah, you can tell people not to do drugs, or you can accept the reality that people are going to do drugs and then just put them in a safer environment to be able to use. So it's a hot topic, and hot take, if you will, also. But anyway, my point is, to what extent should somebody who is actively using drugs be enabled or be cast out on the street? It's a tough question, and I do wish that TBH, the U.S. was a country that was like Finland, of course, but that kind of like had something to, I don't even want to say rehabilitate, but like, let's say manage that situation, because it does become a burden for the families of the person who, is struggling. So that's what I think happened. I don't actually know, but like, anyway, I ended up getting some check in the mail by accident for the former tenant, and I had to like figure out how to get it to the guy. And apparently the guy is homeless, which is what my neighbor just told me. And she's like, I send it to him every week and he goes and picks it up at the post office. I'm like, well, there's some money in there, so like hopefully that helps him out. Yeah, I felt really like there's a check in here, I need to get this to the guy. However, and I figured out how to do it, so shout out. I hope he uses it for something practical like food, please. I'm gonna pray that happens. This is something like, when I see people begging for money, I instead will give them food because I don't want to support the drug addiction if that's what's going on. And I remember my friend is like, who cares if it makes them happy? And I'm like, I can't. That's just not my value system. I'm sorry. I'm pretty, as my brother says, closed-minded when it comes to drugs, so I'm totally not okay. Hopefully this doesn't invalidate the content, because talking about illicit substances is something that YouTube doesn't like. But anyway, is this a political issue? I don't really like talking about political issues either. Anyway. So, yeah, but that's a complicated thing, and this goes back to, really, my point is somebody was living here who's no longer living here, and while I feel sad for this guy, really, I felt very bad for him, I was also very grateful that I have a place to live, because I didn't. So it's hard. It's really hard. So, the reality is, like, I am kind of on average doing better than like an average 30-year-old living where I live, like, honestly, in terms of like how my life is going and like me being able to like afford things. Okay, I'll put it that way. Now, the thing I find really crazy is if I take my most high earning couple friends that I can think of, these people still do not live in like houses. They live usually in like a condo of some sort, and this seems to be like anybody who can afford anything can usually afford a condo. And yeah, so I have one friend actually who's married to a doctor, and even they can't afford something super luxurious. And I'm just like, so where's all the money? I guess it's stuck in the previous generations. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about. So, yes, previous generations had a very different situation. A lot of this has to do with the fact that job hopping is a lot more common today. People tend to stay with the same employer for, like, I think the average is 3 years. Don't quote me on that. I need to, like, fact check myself on that. Whereas before, it was a lot more common that people would get a job out of high school and they would just stay with that job pretty much until they retired. My dad is a great example of that, actually. He's been with the same company his whole life and then retired, and now he has his own business. Yeah, I guess I come from an entrepreneurial family, which is why I do YouTube. Yeah, my dad was like, you get paid in royalties from YouTube? That's cool. I've never had that. So yeah, so basically it means like I'm a famous actress. No, it doesn't, but I'm being stupid. Okay, so anyway, the thing was, people were hitting these, like, life milestones, if you will, a lot earlier and a lot more frequently than we are these days. So, I remember one article I read somewhat recently. All right, so there are two things. One is going to be about rent, and the other one is going to be about why people aren't having kids. But before, and I'm going to make a note of that so I don't forget, because that's... Okay. Yeah, let's not lose my train of thought here. That's what I was trying to manage. But yes, going back to, people got out of high school, got a job, stayed with that job. Any kind of job was usually enough to let you have a house somehow. This also has to do with the mass construction of suburban, sprawls, if you will, post World War II. So, there were a lot of people coming home from war and they gave them jobs of building homes, and then people were inhabiting these homes. This also was like the whole revolution around, women having more, let's say, like housewife capabilities, like the vacuum cleaner came out, the dishwasher, washing machine, all this stuff that started getting more high tech that apparently wasn't there before. I don't know, this was long before my time, so I'm just making things up. I'm not making them up. I'm reciting them based on what I read. So the other thing that, like, you may not realize, and this is according to the guy who wrote the Psychology of Money book, Morgan Housel or whatever his last name is, I forget. But yeah, that guy, I listened to a talk actually from him, and he was saying, like, what you don't realize actually is from that time period, the houses, like, comparatively were a lot smaller than they are now. So the issue is, like, there are these bigger houses, they're getting much more expensive, and the people who, the generation before us were already, like, married, had a stable job, having kids, like, all that is happening a lot earlier now than it does now. A lot earlier than it does now. That's what I'm trying to say. And there are a lot of different reasons for this. Aside from just general, like, economics, and things get more expensive as things, inflation, that's the word I'm looking for. So one of the articles I'd read recently was talking about how people don't want to have kids anymore because they feel like they need to have a house as a precursor to having kids. That's cool. That's very responsible, unlike myself. So, what I kind of have realized, and I remember my friend really putting it like this. She's like, poor people are just going to have kids and just not think about the finances. But people who have money are the ones who are going to, like, wait too long, basically, and then sometimes can't have kids. And that's why IVF is becoming very popular, and we're really having an issue with, like, I don't want to say people who should be having kids, but yeah, let's say the more responsible people having kids are not necessarily having kids. I don't know. Am I really responsible? I've been told I am. Not sure I agree. But, yeah, so the whole thing is people are like, I need to have a house before I can have kids. And then, people are waiting a long time, and then people are having a lot of fertility issues. I actually talked to somebody recently in Finland who told me that somebody they knew worked at a fertility clinic, and you may think it's only people in their 30s coming in with fertility issues. In fact, that is not the case. Even people in their 20s now are having fertility issues. And we all know if this is environmental or what's going on. But the problem is people are waiting so long to get all the ducks in a row before they do the having kids thing. And then the having kids thing, like, might not even be accessible. So I kind of like the reverse approach that I did, which I'm not sure I'd recommend this, but for me it worked, like, where I was just like, got pregnant, and I was like, okay, crap, I'm gonna figure this all out real quick, like where I'm gonna live and all this. And then I did, and then it was fine, and now we're chilling. And what I realized is my child really does not need a big, nice house to live in. That would be nice, and that was the standard I grew up with. And I'm not gonna lie, there is a little bit of guilt that I'm not gonna be able to give my kid the things that I had, but I'm gonna give my kid the things I didn't have, which is travel and like an international perspective and things that are part of my value system. So having a nice big house, basically, I chose to extradite this from my value system, even though it's one that I grew up with as an American, because it's not accessible, right? Like it's sort of like you can just choose to be, it's a lot easier to just be happy with the things that you have than it is to be like, I will only be happy when I get this thing, but this thing that is not even accessible for like anybody else. Thinking about whether I should put this out into the universe or not. Whatever. So, like, you know, I did have a relationship with the baby's dad before things happened. And I remember, you know, before, like, any of that stuff with the baby and everything, I was like, yeah, I'm really stressed out because I got to move out, and I just can't figure out what to do. And I mean, this was a thing before the baby. The baby just kind of, like, you know, really made it go faster. And I need to find a place to live. I was, like, going back and forth between, do I move in with other relatives? Like, I had to move out of my dad's house. Don't ask me why, but I had to. And so, you know, he's like, the baby's dad is like, you know, you're in a situation where, like, it's not just you, it's like the entire economy, basically, and it's like most people in your situation are having a hard time moving out. And like, yes, and it's also like, basically what I've explained to somebody recently is it's either like you just get into one of those freakishly good jobs, or quite frankly, you have to come from a family who has some money to be able to help you. I'm not really going to explain where I fall into that category, but probably guilty. So this has been my perception of really what's going on. Now, if you're really kind of screwed, you're going to end up having lots of like roommates, and you're going to have really unstable housing and have to like keep moving because things keep getting more expensive. Which brings me to my next point, which focuses on the cost of housing and how that has become very complicated. I had actually spoken to a coworker like not a year ago. It was while I was pregnant. So less than a year ago. And he's like, the thing is with rent, you can make money on people forever, but once somebody has their own house, you can no longer make money on them. And I'm like, true. And so really, you know, the whole BlackRock is buying everything, but like for real, because now, and my friend was explaining this to me, and this was the discussion we were having this weekend, because she lives in one of these, you know, like luxury apartments. And the thing is, they can keep like, you know, raising rent on all of the people in that building, like year after year after year. Whereas if you have a landlord and you have like a personal like relationship and rapport with the landlord, a lot of times what that's going to turn into is that the rent is going to stay like much more stable because of that relationship. So you're not really trying to like price gouge this person you have a personal relationship with. So it's almost like the impersonability of these big rental units is one of the major issues, like, you know, preventing the American dream. And it's also like the fact that you have to be like considered, you know, this is categorically like a high, what do we call this? A high net worth individual to be able to just like casually live on your own and survive in America. You know, I don't like that. That's not the case in Finland. You could be a Kela rat, as they call it, and just be on like government subsidies and still somehow pay for your own independent, super small, tiny place to live, but still independently. So, you know, I think what's starting to happen is the American dream around like getting the stable job, getting married early, having kids, living in a house. It doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. I want to say it doesn't exist, but it exists in a lot more infrequent numbers than it did in the generation ago and before that. So I think really what is probably going to happen is, and this is what my dad explained to me, I kind of agree with this, is the housing market is at some point going to need to adjust itself to like more of these like single independent people who need housing. But it sucks because you got all these like 30-year-olds living at home, and, you know, would have been me, but instead I got lucky. I mean, I got incredibly lucky. Like, I pay a lot less than, well, I pay probably average, but I have a lot bigger of a space than I would for what I pay rent for, whatever my monthly payment. So yeah, whereas like going back to like having the nice relationship, like my mom has like super cheap rent. She has a great relationship with her landlord, and she's like, I'm grandfathered in, and the situation is too great that I can never leave it. And that is like a very real reality of what, you know, again, this like, are you getting price gouged by the BlackRock, or do you have the personal landlord relationship? But the personal landlord relationship is starting to wither away because of more of the BlackRock coming in and stealing things. So, you know, this now begs the question of like, what is the future of housing? Are more people going to end up homeless? Are more people going to have multi-generational living? Like, really, what is going to happen? And the answer is, we don't know. The housing market could adjust, like I said, and start, it was so weird actually when I was looking at places to live. There was like this one giant house that basically somehow subdivided a bunch of units to like make them independent mortgages. And I'm like, how is this even legal? I have no idea. I'd be really curious to see the legal paperwork behind that, but whatever. So yes, I don't know. We're going to have to see. I always ask the very like anarchist question of like, how bad could it possibly get? Are people just going to start like killing each other and like very doomsday and like stealing food from each other because people are out in the street and have nowhere to go? I don't know. I don't know what the future is going to look like. And I ask myself this question a lot. And then like, how long is it going to take for things to get that bad? People are living a lot longer now. People are occupying their places for longer. People who are like, old people in their 90s live in this big house that would much more like practically be occupied by a young family who can't technically afford it. I remember I was at the doctor's one time, and I feel like I said this one time, like, there was this lady had her phone on speaker. She was like older, elderly, and the person is like, we'd like to buy your house. And she's like, you should be ashamed of yourself. This is my retirement home. And I'm like, this is hilarious. Okay. So yeah. So anyway, my point being, why is the American dream dead? Because the American dream, you need to understand, revolves around having a house with a white picket fence and a car, probably more than one car, and a housewife and kids. And like, not only do people not have that anymore, I'm not even sure that people want that or that's what people's value system is. There's this whole thing about like Gen Z wants more work-life balance and mental health and blah, blah, blah. It's true. People are a lot more into that stuff now and a lot more public and open about it. Whereas, the whole thing that I've listened to other YouTubers, because I listen to psychology YouTube, talk about, the whole mental health scapegoat thing just used to be like the alcoholic in the family that nobody knew why they were an alcoholic. And it was just like, yeah, because that's how they self-medicate. Cool. Yeah. So, things are already looking different, but things are going to continue to look a lot different. And again, I don't really know like what the end goal is. That's not even the best way of putting it. But the point is, America is not what it used to be. And it's like, I'm speaking about this strictly from economics and like sociology probably, because I don't care as much about politics, but this probably touches on that slightly. The thing people are always trying to get me to talk about that I don't want to talk about because I don't care. But no, it's because I have my own views on this that I don't particularly feel like sharing with everybody, because the thing is, when you get into arguing about politics, you get into arguing about belief, and it's like the whole joke about don't talk about religion and politics, because it's a heavy conversation topic. That's not a light conversation topic. I actually have this book from so long ago. I have to find it wherever it is, because this is so funny. It's like, how to start a conversation. Not that I need help with that at this point. But I can talk to a wall, as you can see right now. But, it was talking about like, don't talk about heavy conversation topics like religion and politics if you first meet somebody. And I'm like, true. So yeah, but I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. And, I think it's pretty ridiculous that if you're comparatively like doing well, it's like what you're doing compared to a generation ago looks like crap. So I like my heart really goes out to people in worse positions than me, because my position, while it was not great, it could be worse. And I know it could be worse based on the story I just told you at the beginning of this video about the guy who needed that check pretty badly. So, another funny, irrelevant story I'm going to tell is like, my friend, I technically can't rent out where I live. And my friend's like, well, what's going to happen when you get married and like have a husband in a house and another kid? And I'm like, I don't know if and when that's happening. And like, I'm just chilling with what's going on in my life right now. Like, I'm not thinking about the future that hard. Like, I had another friend the other day ask me, what's your plan? And I'm like, I don't got one. I'm just vibing with life. It's fine. Things are going fine. Like, I mean, I have goals eventually I'd like to reach, but like, we're pretty chill right now. So, but yeah, just because the American dream is dead doesn't mean your soul has to be. So, find another way to have meaning. I drive around, I look at these big houses, and I'm like, what's the point? That's a lot to manage. It's expensive, a lot to clean. That's a lot. That looks like a lot of plane tickets right there. That's what I think to myself. Anything that's a big asset that costs a lot of money, I'm like, how many adventures could I go on with that amount of money? A lot. So I'm just going to keep doing me and keep, migrating. Although I'm having fun being in one place for once, to be honest with you, because I'm trying to get my house in order and still not anywhere there. And then maybe I'll do the house tour. I'll think about it. Okay, until next time. Bye.